So welcome, and everyone who is here and everyone who will come. We will see those dripping in, and sometimes you will suddenly hear new people who don't know that their mic is on. But welcome, my name is Simone, and this is Through the Window. So tonight we are launching the online exhibition that we have started with the support of the Dutch Embassy in Turkey, together with Kubra Uzum and Omer Tefik Erten.
Yeah.
And we've been working on this for quite a few months now, a few weeks. And we had an amazing get-together, Saskia remembers, I'm sure, in July, end of July, and also an amazing conversation then. Hey, Donalea, nice to see you. All the way from New York, I should say. And so that's what we're doing tonight. We're launching the exhibition, and I'm just gonna do like this. I don't know if you've been checking your Instagram already, but the works are on there and they're really, really amazing. We're really happy. And we'd like to say thank you to all the artists. Kubra.
Yes, I would like to thank to all the artists. Let me say the names. Akışka, Albertina Sibila, Ateş Alpar, Bulut Sezer, Efemine, Fırat Uran, Gayatri Kodikal, Jale Nemazdrasi, Joy Brandma, Kadiha El Karaz Alami, Magda On Pure, Makizm, Meltem Sarıkaya, Minnie Maxwell, Mira Thompson, Özgürcan Taşçı, Paula Chavez Bonilla, Prince Chris, Ugenfo, and Vinita Gadne. Thank you for your solidarity and time and collaboration. Thank you for being with us.
Yes, and we will find many more ways to thank and celebrate everyone who participated. And tonight we're doing that first with a conversation and then with a party. Because we will have DJ Discourse and Sky Deep and MX Sur and Eche Ozel. We will all have those DJs after our conversation. All right?
Yeah.
I'll see some nods. Great. So before we dive into the conversation, we will be talking about queer commodification. What does it mean to use queer as a signifier when you're, for example, selling your art or making art? What does it mean to use the word queer when you have an event, or like when is your music queer, for example? But we will also be talking about fundraising. So many questions, and we will not be interpreting as if we are academics. We're trying to host this conversation really as a way to get to know the practice of the people we have invited. And tonight we have invited Shishani Franks and Sanne Pols and Esra Osban. And we will hear those three tonight. And if you have questions, you can put them in the chat so we can come back to them. All right, we'll have about an hour, like a big hour. How do you say that? A large hour, a chunky hour. And then we will go into DJing. But first, I would like to invite Bart van Bolhuis to say something on behalf of the Dutch Embassy in Turkey, who have generously supported us. So, there we go.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Simone. Thank you, Kubra, as well, here from Istanbul. On Istiklal. It's really a pleasure and honor for me to be with you for this launching event. And I think it's exciting. We're happy to contribute from the embassy and the consulate here down the road on Istiklal. This is, Kubra, you know, this is famous ground here in Istanbul. The Istiklal, it used to be very crowded in June when the Pride was still here. We're looking forward to the moment that the Pride will be back on Istiklal. For us, this is an important event because the best of two worlds is coming together. We're happy to, as you know, to support LGBTI activities during the years, and we have a big cultural agenda, and this is a perfect match. And it's great to see work from artists from Turkey, from the Netherlands, and other places around the country, around the world. It's great to have people from New Amsterdam, New York, with us, and Athens. And so this really, it's really uniting. So really happy for us. Also, my colleagues here, Corinne and Ipek from the Cultural Department, to support this great initiative. And it's difficult times for all of for all of us. I think especially also for the queer community during COVID, but it's also an impulse for innovations. And what's happening tonight and with this whole program is an innovation in itself. So really happy with it, and we're happy to be part of it. So we're looking forward to see all the beautiful results. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And the results are beautiful, I should say. Go to the Instagram. Woo! And I'll just do a little cheers, not by myself, but with you. And I shall say that some of the best parties I've been to in my life, which stretches beyond COVID, are during COVID on Zoom. So cheers to our exhibition.
Cheers, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Well, I will do it. Cheers with a real Bomonti from Istanbul. Cheers.
Cheers with an empty glass.
And thank you all for being here. And so the way that this conversation is going to go, as far as we can script it beforehand, I'll just mute. If the host can mute. Yes. So what we've scripted, and we'll see where it goes, is that I will ask each of the guests some questions about their practice by way of a bio. So instead of them talking about their own accomplishments, we can dive into immediately. And after introducing the practices of the three guests, we can have a conversation together, they among themselves, but also with your input through the chat. All right. So Shishani, are you there? I see you.
I am here. Yes, hi everyone. I'm really happy to see everybody from all over the world. Lovely that we're here, connected. So I go by the term singer-songwriter. I write songs. I'm a vocalist. I do different projects, mainly work with what people tend to call marginalized groups. So I'm from Namibia, born in Namibia, raised in the Netherlands, have parents in both places. And what I try to do with my practice is to bring people together. So let's cross the divides amongst race, urban, rural, queer, not queer, those that have access to funds, those that don't have access to funds. So the latest project that I've done is create a band with only women. Before that, I worked with 4 elderly women who live in the Kalahari Desert in Namibia, to source traditional music, but mainly also put them in a spotlight of not being seen as these poor, marginalized Bushmen women. They go by their own name, San people, in this case, Junwasi people. So what I try to do is to use my music to tell stories, and I like to connect with people from all over the world. I never really saw myself as necessarily a queer artist. I was always trying to connect with whoever, but I wrote music that became also important for the queer movement in Namibia. It became an anthem song to talk about being gay, being trans, being lesbian. And I just realized that having the visibility of being, let's say, in the pop scene, being seen as a pop singer, I felt it was really important to talk about social issues, whether it's about gentrification, corruption, equal rights for our community. I use music for that, and I just like to connect over borders. So I think growing up as a teenager, I realized when I started identifying as queer that a lot of life was then only having queer friends and only going to queer events and only being queer. And I never wanted that. I always wanted to just be. So that's why I also never really marketed myself as being a queer artist, but through interviews and stuff that kind of spread out. So that's maybe in a nutshell. So I've been traveling a lot, doing a lot of touring, a lot of collaborations, and that's actually what it's about for me, to connect different parts of the world, different stories, and really highlight stories that I feel are not being seen, not being told, not being highlighted in a positive way. It's always sad and problematic, and I just really like to celebrate the beauty of a lot of cultures that are pushed away in this global capitalist patriarchal system.
Ooh, yeah. Let's talk a bit more about some specific projects, but I do want to go back to something you said just now about, like, I never identified necessarily, but it's something that's put on to me. Like, do you, in your practice, in terms of identifying as queer, differentiate between sort of the political struggle that comes with queerness versus an identity marker? Is that some, yeah.
Yeah, well, let me put it this way. So I spent, let's say I grew up in Groningen, northern part of the Netherlands, then came to Amsterdam for obvious reasons. I was looking for freedom and I was looking for a community where I could freely be queer. And, you know, I got so comfortable in meeting people and having a community that didn't become important for me anymore. It was not even necessary to have that label. I felt completely seen, accepted, heard, everything. But in my early 20s, I really wanted to reconnect with my roots in Namibia. And that's when everything shifted for me, because I went back and I got to know people from all over. And of course, I ended up in a queer community, but the reality was so different from mine, where most of my friends were dealing with the most horrible things. We all know about it: corrective rape, being thrown out of your family, losing jobs, all of the stuff, all of the problems that we know. And that's when I felt like I needed to do something. I needed to say something. So I wrote the song Minority. And then the journalists all wanted to jump onto me as the lesbian, the gay girl with the guitar. And I actively didn't want that. I wanted people to listen to my music. So I asked them, and I was also respected in that sense. I'm very happy that people didn't disrespect that request, to just market me as a singer, because I knew, because of the conservative Christian ways of most of the population, that would already block people from wanting to listen to me or hear my story. So it was only when I felt that I had established myself as an artist that, well, I felt like I had to make a statement, or people wanted to hear that story. And then I felt comfortable to show that, because I first wanted to reach more people and not already be blocked by being queer. But I've never hidden it from anybody within the shows, within, you know, my personal circles. I've never tried to run away from it, but I just knew it was more of a political thing for me to be able to make a living as an artist. And then later, with, you know, the exposure that I got, I was very happy to share my stories and my feelings and my own process and what I want for the queer community. So it's like people will take out whatever they want to take out when journalists want to write about your story. If they only look at the song Minority, then I'm the queer artist. If not, then I'm an activist. So it really depends on who's looking and who wants to tell what story and what people want to highlight. But for me, it was just important in the beginning of my career to not be labeled and then already disregarded for that reason.
Yeah, and when you say like who is looking, right? And when I earlier said like the commodification of queerness, that of course takes like comes from a starting point where you expect that queerness can be commodified. So it is something that can be celebrated, and even so much so that it can be that it can have commercial value. Yeah. But now you're also saying like I didn't want to be labeled as such because of Christian values.
Yeah, in this context. Yeah. And the commodification, I feel, is just the past 10 years. Before that, it was really not hip to be a queer singer, you know, really not. So I feel that it's also like, I'm happy that there's more visibility and that there's more space to carry it proudly for whoever who wants to do it. But for me, for example, I get a lot of messages from people from Namibia, like, well, I have a question. Are you gay? And for them, that's still this thing like, oh, really? Is that artist that I like, she is gay? And it's a thing so much so that they need to reach out to me and actually have that confirmed. So it was not a positive thing in the context where I was very active. In this case, it was Namibia, or in Africa, playing in Malawi and in Kenya and Morocco. So it really depends also where we're talking from, you know, maybe in the Netherlands or maybe in the States, it could be a different context for me. But it was, like I said, it really depends. It wouldn't have done any good for me if it would have been commodified in that way at the beginning of my career.
Yeah, and if you take that notion of who is looking, how do you, as an artist, as a musician, how do you navigate agency over your image, if at all? Because there's, of course, a romantic notion of, oh, I'm just doing me or something like that. But we know we're living in a political structure.
Of course. My agency is, and this is idealistic because I wanted people to see me as a human being and to see me as an artist first. And yes, I'm all of these things. You know, I feel gender fluid. I have a mixed background, Belgian, Namibian, have a relationship with a woman. All these things are part of me and they do influence my practice, but it's not who I am. So for me, my agency was wearing what I wanted to wear, say what I want to say, talk about all the issues that I want to talk about, which does mean let's talk about this issue of discriminating against trans and queer people. And in that case, I feel like my voice, literally what I have to say, is my agency, and that I've been able to somehow always safely do what I do wherever it is what I'm doing, whether it was in India, whether it was in Russia, whether it was in Kenya, whether it was in the States, whether it was here in Europe, whether it was in Namibia. In that sense, I feel lucky because I know that perhaps that's also just the privilege of me having a certain passport, a European passport, and I can travel around and I can do what I want. In that sense, it had granted me a certain safety. And that's very different from if I would look at my peers who live in Namibia and are also queer artists and also doing what they do, but there's no plan B. So when you talk about these things, then it's like, oh, you know, these people, with emphasis on these people, which means that you get less gigs and, you know, people talk, it's such a small world. So agency comes with a lot of things. Like I had the privilege of being able to, you know, find my sense of being very comfortable with myself in the context of Amsterdam for me now. And maybe just not having met a lot of violent, let's say, borders. I've seen and I've heard a lot of pain of all my friends, and these are things that are part of me daily, that trouble me, and that's why I do what I do. But I'm in a position where I'm quite privileged to travel around and to say what I say, however I want to do it. So I think agency is so different for so many people. I can't really pinpoint it, but that's let's say those are my experiences until now.
But maybe then, like, talk from that perspective of privilege in relation to international collaborations, because I'm thinking about, for example, Namibian Tales, where you have also invited musicians to come to the Netherlands and to play concerts here, and if I'm correct, it's also a collaboration with UNESCO.
Yeah, it is.
And how does it work for you when there's an institutional power, authority involved in a collaboration like this? And there's also a colonial
absolutely,
right?
Yeah. So there are many layers. In this case, so this collaboration was, like I said earlier, with 4 ladies who live in a really on the outskirts, in the middle of what people would say nowhere, in the Kalahari Desert in Namibia. These women didn't have passports, don't read and write, super wise. They know everything about nature, you know, but they're completely not in the system as we know it. So that also made it in a way attractive, I guess, for a fund who wants to work on cultural heritage, intangible heritage, because it's important. We see it all over the world. It's disappearing. You know, people are going to urban areas. So all this traditional knowledge, all these traditional songs, all these stories are being lost. So in that sense, it was great to get the funds from UNESCO to be able to do this. Otherwise, it would have never been possible. So the colonial history became a problem when the European side of my band, so we're an Amsterdam-based group, Namibian Tales, so it's a quartet, and basically I'm the one from Namibia. We were diving into my personal history, the country's history, and we interpret the music with European artists, bringing them to Namibia and then working with the sound musicians. A lot of people had really bad feelings about it because it often happens that somebody goes to, let's say, the rainforest or the Kalahari Desert or Aboriginal people or whoever, and they sample music or they do a collaboration with music, and the musicians are exploited. But it makes these artists look great because they had this exotic collaboration. So we had a lot of resistance also within Namibia, also because there's tribalism. So Namibia was part of South Africa, fell under apartheid, so the divide and conquer is very strong there. Every tribe was kind of set up against each other. So my mother is from the Awambo tribe, which is very different from the San people. So they were like, why are you working with these San people? Why aren't you doing Oshiwambo speaking music? Why are you working with this other tribe? Why are you favoring them? So there were all these kind of, let's say, frictions on political levels, historical levels. But what was important for us is that we gave these musicians that they had their own choice, like, okay, wear whatever you want to wear, because they were used to people coming and then saying, okay, wear your traditional skins because that looks more authentic. And we see a lot of these kind of collaborations. So our whole approach was that they got equal payment. For us, that meant being underpaid. For them, that meant being millionaires overnight. So, those were the things that we were trying to kind of balance out, is saying, hey, please wear what you want to wear. Please tell us if you don't like something. Please, please let us know. But of course, there is a difference with them being very, very dependent on our budget that we're offering, that they wouldn't say. I really think that they wouldn't say if they liked it or not, because for them it's like, okay, you don't want to lose the money. Plus, they're not used to Europeans coming and asking what they want and trusting that they would get equal pay. I mean, it's historically never been like that. So why all of a sudden would these 4 people come and pay us the right amount? So there was a lot of distrust for all the right reasons. So it was a very difficult collaboration on that sense, because you have resistance of people thinking that you're coming to exploit when you finally want to do it the right way. You have people not trusting you because of obvious reasons. But what was really, really powerful for me is that these women came to Amsterdam on Ketikoti, which is the abolition of slavery. They come from the desert. We took a boat ride around the canals in Amsterdam, the first time they were on so much water, and in a city where one of the, what's his name? Verwoerd is a guy that was very important in constructing apartheid in South Africa. So for them to come and be one of the most marginalized people in today's Namibia and Southern Africa, to come to the city where one of these people that was so important to instill apartheid, it felt like we were in a way making something right. It spiritually, it felt really, really powerful for me to be able to bring them here, have them on stage in the BIM House, which is a respected concert hall, and them sing their own songs and have them talk, even if people didn't understand what they were saying, but talk in their own language. We had a translator, but it just felt like it wasn't, I'm not trying to represent them. We as a group are not trying to represent them, but we really thought, okay, just pass the mic. Of course, we had our artistic ideas, and we're the ones that came with the money and the idea to make this project. But the whole outset was to basically have us there as equals and learn from them. And also in everything that I put out in the media, I said, okay, but these women are as experts. They don't have a physical master's degree, but that's what they are. These are the PhD people that they don't work with the system of papers and going to school and stuff, but we should actually look at them as experts and not as folkloristic musicians only. We should break these barriers of titles. Why would I be more important because I have a master's in musicology? I'm learning everything from them, basically, when it comes to this project. So in how we used it visually, like asking them to wear whatever they wanted, in the language that we used, in sharing the stage and having a half a circle and not me in front with the guitar and them in the back as like a choir of indigenous musicians. These were ways that we tried to kind of balance out hierarchies. But of course there was a hierarchy. We came with money and they were in need of money, so they would still, it took a long time for them to trust us. And I really hope that one day they will be honest enough to say what they really felt, because until the end I was always wondering, like, but what do you really think? But I think it just takes time, because it's worlds apart. And for them, I think also a first experience where people would actually listen to them. I honestly think that they would never they don't think that we were actually listening to them, but still finding ways to kind of exploit them.
Yeah.
So yeah.
No, yeah, thank you for sharing that. I'm just thinking about something you said when they were on stage at the BIM house and speaking a known language that people would not, like the audience would not understand. And then something you say at the end where you said maybe one day they will say what they really felt.
Yeah.
But maybe it's also about having a space of illegibility, right? Like not reaching for an understanding or not demanding an understanding. So like if that,
or knowing that it's so different.
Mhm.
Our understanding of something can be so different, or like the importance is so different. So one of the funny things that happened, this was in Namibia, we were recording the album live, and at the end you're supposed to bow, right? So we turned towards the audience and we wanted to bow to them, but they bowed to us, and we were in a circle. And in that sense, it was like, hey, we as a group, 9 of us, we did this together. So we greet each other, that all these people are here. That's, you know, it's fun that they're here, but that it's not really about that. You know, we did this. And just understanding that, wow, you know, you can really look at things and experience a space. Like a stage for me is a holy thing. You know that a stage is a stage. For them, it's just some wood, which is a bit higher than the ground. You know, they didn't experience the stage the way that we experience the stage. So all these things made me realize that, you know, it's just a certain way of looking, and you learn so much by actually engaging and humbling yourself to the fact that there is a different perspective. And that's, I think, the most important thing that I've learned. And we don't have to say exactly the same thing, but maybe, I mean, we laugh, and maybe that means something for you and that means something else for me. But the fact is that we came together and we did this.
There's a question in the chat from Chris, which is, if I'm just summing it up because I couldn't read all of it while listening to you, Shishani, but there's something about pain. And it reminded me of when I first heard Shishani's music, which was actually at a healing circle. That was a do-it-yourself organized healing gathering by Clarice Gargar and Naomi Pieter, who are activists in the Netherlands, together with Glenn Helberg, who is a psychiatrist, among many other things, also a great person. But okay, and there was a healing circle after Pride. So this was Pride Amsterdam, and there had been so many events of violence. There are so many straight people around doing the Pride event because it's almost like a festival. So people come there to get drunk, etc. Whatever, there's nothing wrong with getting drunk, but the way that people behave. So we came together there, and you also played a song. And Chris's question about pain made me want to ask another question to you before we go to Ezra, which is about healing and how on an affective level, right, on a bodily level, you let that be part of your practice as a musician.
For me, it's the source and it's the essence of what I do and why I do. Like, I sing because I wanted to heal myself. So singing for me was writing my own stories and being able to put it somewhere where I felt it was safe, because the world doesn't always understand you. And then finding out that it actually did something to somebody else. By being on stage with these women, and this is now in the Namibian context, our first concerts, and having these women, you know, play in front of like a huge crowd going crazy for their music, when in daily life they're not even seen as equal human beings. That's the level on which they live. It was so intense that the eldest lady, she was just crying. I mean, it's overwhelming. Like, how could music get all these people together and actually see her as a human being when she all her life has not been seen that way? And that for me was one of the most powerful things I've ever experienced. And through working with them, I got in contact with actual healing songs, and I started using that in my own practice, because I also realized how important it is to sing together. Whether you're a singer or not a singer, it's about, you know, using your voice and just creating a frequency together. So for me, I've realized that by singing and by also telling a story and then singing, but even singing itself can bring people's guards down, that people that I have in the crowd that completely are disconnected from my reality would come to me in tears and open up, because somehow music and the frequency of voice and the frequency of, you know, instruments can open up something, like really bring your guards down. So for me, music is medicine. That is what it is. That's what it is for me, at least, and that's what I hope it can be for anybody, whether it's, you know, making you dance and kind of forget whatever stress you're dealing with, or crying because you broke up with your, you know, with your ex or whatever, and putting a sad song on repeat, or whatever. That is what music is to me. So it's absolutely something physical, and that's the weird thing of these times, that when I perform, that I don't have, like, I'm not really looking at your real face, and I don't really hear your real sound with me, you know, the breath or whatever. And that's the biggest thing I miss of these times. I'm connecting with all of you, but it's really different if we're just in the same space and, yeah, just feeling each other. But yeah, music, I think, is the most powerful thing we could do for the body, and for, you know, just getting out of our brains also.
Yeah, I'm seeing Ezra nod. Thank you so much, Shishani. Ezra Osborne. Hello.
Hello. I was so into listening to Shishani, and thanks you everyone, first of all, who organized this event, and Shishani for the great first talk. So I am Ezra. What I am doing is quite scattered. I do produce some still and moving images. I think I really don't feel comfortable with the word filmmaker. And I am recently realizing that curation and programming is a creative practice, so an artistic practice. Before that, I think it was something that I always did for a lot of years, but now I am more realizing that it's also an artistic practice that I can identify myself with. So what I think I was mostly into still and moving images, and I really loved playing with them, but still couldn't really find myself within the norms of filmmaking and production. So somehow followed a lot of video activism and video artists. But for last 5 years, I have been one of the organizers of the Pink Life Queer Fest in Turkey, the only queer film festival that is happening since 2011. And I did a lot of curation, which I really enjoyed. And I think I am more of a, I don't know, maybe gatherer, organizer, mediator of, for creating platforms and like showing films, talking with the audience. That is something I really enjoy, and I still continue. Now I have started a PhD, and I'm working on like porn cinemas that trans folks will try to recreate those cinemas with the younger generation. So I'm mostly trying to balance my activism with academia or art, or generally in search for how to do it. But yeah, that's
because how does that go? Because in academia there is, of course, like hashtags, you have hypes where you can get funding, and this goes for, you know, artists, organizers, activists, but also academics, of course, where if you drop not to be cynical in any way, but like if you drop the right terms, queer, for example, can be helpful in getting funding. Is that something you also navigate?
Yeah, definitely. I think, like, to be honest, I really believe in what I'm doing in terms of my PhD, but at the end of the day, I am doing my PhD in the US, and I am like kind of a checkbox from Middle East, queer, like it all, of course, brings some kind of privileges in that circumstances. And as Shishani said, it may differ in different contexts, but in the US, yes, it is like, oh, we have a queer from Middle Eastern. And that is something sellable there. But it was also one of the reasons why I had to go there, because I wanted to stay in Turkey and work on the project, but almost every academic that I wanted to work with are fired from their jobs or had to leave the country because of the peace petition that they signed, or honestly,
sorry, that was recognizing Kurdish resistance, right?
Definitely. It was one of the biggest peace petitions, and yeah, a lot of people had to leave the academia due to those firings and like imprisonment, and like it's a long story, but at the end of the day, US was one of the places that I can get funding and do what I really want to do, and that's how I ended up there. And it really is actually about funding as well. Like why I ended up there is highly related with the structure of academia and what can I study in Turkey in terms of queer, in which university, with whom, which funding led me to the US. Yeah.
And does that in any way, like the transnational moves that one has to make in terms of localizing yourself as a person, but also your practice, this transness, if we take it as a moving through space, right? Does this also inhabit in a way what queer means for you, in the sense that it always responds? It's a bit of a leading question. I'm realizing I'm like, I'm saying, does this also? But you can say no. But like, in the way that queerness responds to whatever it's confronted with, instead of being a static, like an identity or a sexual.
Yeah, I don't have a direct answer for this, but something that we were just talking with a friend yesterday seems like quite relevant here. Like, I think that was almost the first time that I'm now studying in California, and that was the first time that I'm feeling why queerness is not the issue, but me being from Middle East or like Southwest Asia is an issue. I'm a migrant. I'm something different there. So like what I really think is like, as someone queer from Turkey, wherever I end up, I have to get into some struggles, like one way or another, and mostly they intersect as we know now, like what is happening all around the world. But queerness can be a commodity or something sellable in some cases, but then something different about your identity is coming up and making creating other obstacles in terms of like creating different struggles that you have to get into. And
and could you share a little bit about the history of starting Pink Life Queer Fest and how that went?
I joined the festival in its 4th year. My colleagues Devotes and all-womxn funded the festival in 2011 in Ankara. And I think most of the people in Turkey still think why the queer festival started from Ankara, but they really love the idea of challenging, like mostly the cultural scene is of course led by Istanbul, and something started from Ankara, and traveling is also, I think, challenging a cultural norm, and I also like that idea a lot. And the festival is being made by Pembe Hayat LGBT Association, and it's the first trans rights association in Turkey. It started in Ankara, and when I joined the festival, there were a lot of demand from the community in Istanbul. They were like, bring a bit of the festival, Istanbul. Why we don't have it? Why everything is in Ankara? And then we started to make like 3-day events after the main festival in Ankara in Istanbul. And in the 5th year, we started to collaborate with local NGOs in 5 different cities and went to 5 cities. So it's like became quite like a festival on wheels. But in the 7th year, while we were organizing the festival, we were planning a pre-event. Like we were going to show some LGBTI films from Germany in collaboration with German embassy. But suddenly Ankara governorship banned those films. And then like in 2 or 3 days, they actually issued a blanket ban on all LGBTI events that bans like film screenings, gatherings, everything and anything that you can imagine. And it took almost 2 years to win this battle for us, but it was like really sad that we couldn't make the festival in Ankara for the last 2 years.
And then it was after the it was prohibited and banned. Was it allowed again after 2 years?
Yeah, now the ban is no longer valid, so the court decided on our side. But for last 2 years, we couldn't have the actual festival in Ankara. It's really strange, I think, because Turkey is a unitary state. It's how it calls itself, but they can issue a ban in Ankara. But we did this festival in Istanbul and in Denizli and in Mersin, but we couldn't do it in Ankara. But it was the times of the state of emergency due to the political situation and bombings in Turkey. So it was like they could have the power to do it. So for 2 years, we couldn't come back home. And this year, this was COVID-19. So hopefully next year.
Yeah, and what does international collaboration mean for the festival? And I'm also thinking back of Shishani and talking about coloniality, where maybe in a completely different context and a completely different relationality. But there is, of course, also an opportunity for countries like the Netherlands, where if something is banned elsewhere, it's a moment to jump in and, you know, be good moral sort of supportive, where there's also elements of pinkwashing happening there. I'm sorry if I'm going like too fast and like skipping through it, but yeah, I would love to hear how you deal with that. And
it is always hard to do, I think, balance those things, because to make a festival you have to get funding, and in Turkey, like, we cannot get any governmental funding, and even for the municipalities which are like from oppositional parties, we had to struggle a lot to get a space. Like, we need venues because we cannot get any movie theaters anymore. Like I think it was in the 5th edition we make the festival free. Like, before that they were always screenings in cafes and free events, but we couldn't make the whole festival free because we were making in a movie theater whose owner was making his own festival, so he was really rigid about the ticket prices. But then when we had the venues like French Cultural Center, like Goethe Institute or those places, then you can make films or screenings more accessible. But then when our events with German embassy was banned, then we were the target, because in Turkey there is like right-wing parties are always trying to support the idea that LGBTI is an organization that is coming from Europe and the US, and so you have to deal with a lot of frictions, as Shishani was saying. You have to think about like when we were banned, some embassies invited us to make the events in their places, but their places is not Turkey. Like, when you're in the place of the embassy, that means that you're in the Netherlands territory. And then if you make this event there, that means something else, as if we cannot do it in Turkey and we have to take custody of someone else's territory. I don't know, it's problematic. So we try to stay as independent as we can do, but get as much support as we can get. But beside the embassies and all these funding systems, I think international, I learned a lot from the other queer festivals all around the world. And for years, we invited like 2 film festivals to make their own programs for the festival. And so that we could learn and look their curation and talk about what is going on in their festivals and learn how they organize, because there are like hundreds of ways of making a film festival, a community festival. And also we curated a lot of programs for festivals like Transcreen in Amsterdam. We have been collaborating with them from the beginning of the festival, and like Hamburg Queer Film Festival, like many others. But queer festivals have a good network among each other. That is like, and every year they gather, and like you can see very big queer festivals like Frameline, but you can see really tiny community festivals presented there and have a chance to talk with their programmers, their organizers. And it is quite refreshing as a curator, as a festival person to see what is happening in different parts. And actually one is really dear to me, that the Queer Migrant Film Festival in Amsterdam. They make an amazing queer academic program that I attended like 2 years ago, and it was one of my best festival experience, like very intimate. I met with great people, great queer filmmakers, and it was the time that I have seen so many POC queer filmmakers in Europe, and that was really refreshing and nourishing. Yeah.
Yeah, and speaking of the Queer Migrant Film Festival, Chris Belloni, he wanted to be here, but he's on a train stuck. So, but in spirit. And when we think about the structure behind the scenes of a film festival like that, what are the ethics that are being followed? I mean, again, diverse ethics, right? But what are some main ones that you think are at the core of how a film festival should treat its participants, audience, and filmmakers?
I again would like to start with funding, because like generally it's, I think what happened with the Queer Fest as well, when you start a festival, like some embassies, like who is promoting LGBTI rights, they're mostly coming to you with a bunch of films that, okay, these films are for you to show. And sometimes there are films that, like, we do care about a film, like, let's say it's a film about the queer migrants in Europe, but not like they are only the subjects. They're not like, you feel it, it's like an author perspective to their lives. Or like, as a programmer here, what I struggled was, there were a lot of films which was marginalizing and really desperate trans stories made by cis hetero men that I don't want to program. Then first you have to resist those push and tell what kind of a program and festival you want to make. And mostly when you come up with the ideas, these funders also support them. Like, maybe it is their first solution to give you a bunch of films that might fit to your festival, but then when you go them and ask for, no, I want to do this with this one, then mostly they are okay. I think it's how you want to position yourself. And yeah, what else I was going to tell? What was the rest of the question?
No, I mean, I think it was just about the core ethics and values that you
I think
yeah.
I learned a lot throughout the process, like how to balance a program, like geography-wise, topic-wise, because we are the only queer festival in Turkey. And for me, queer cinema is not only about LGBTI films or LGBTI representations. I think it really goes beyond that. It has really strong ties with DIY filmmaking and experimental filmmaking. I love films that really challenges the norms of filmmaking. And but to make a queer film festival in Turkey, I think you have to balance those, because you don't have anything else. But you also have to balance themes, you have to balance geographies, you have to include more representation and see, like, last year there were like 4 really good films from Brazil, but I cannot really program 4 really good films from Brazil in a very tiny festival in Turkey. Then you have to make choices and prioritize something and see which one is really valid for the topics that you want to discuss. Because I think a festival is no longer somewhere that you only show films, but bring discussions, artists, and create a space for people to share some ideas. And that is always an ethical decision that you should make and consult with your team and funders, participants, and everyone. Yeah.
I would love to ask you about the importance of storytelling, but let's do that with Sanne so that you all can jump in later on that. In between, just saying to y'all who are there, I see you, If you have a question, you can put it in the chat box for later. And I also want to do a little shout out now that we're talking about film and curation and making new films possibly, because I see that Minnie Maxwell has arrived. And I know that Minnie has been wanting to make a film and that they've also put out a fundraise. So maybe Minnie, you want to put that in the chat box later, since we've been discussing that. Ezra, thank you so much. And jump into the conversation with Sanne whenever you want, of course. Hello, Sanne. Paul.
Hi,
Are you there?
I am.
Love, I see. So Sanne, we know you, some people know you as the founder of the LGBT Tour in Amsterdam, which consists of a lot of storytelling, which is a nice bridge. Do you want to say something about starting the tour?
Yeah.
And how that went for you?
So, how I always start my LGBT tour is how I start the tour. I think I moved from the south of the Netherlands 10 years ago to Amsterdam. And when I moved here, I thought I was totally straight about it a lot. But not good enough. And the first girl I met in my master's study, religion studies, she was out and proud, and I totally fell in love with her, which was a giant surprise to me, but also very, very nice, because luckily she was also in love with me, and we got into a relationship. And because I wasn't in a closet before, I didn't experience it like that. It was quite vivid and a hard cut how people around me suddenly reacted on me walking hand in hand with a woman instead of a man. And so before, of course, no one on the street would turn their head, say something positive nor negative, and now suddenly everyone would react to it. And for me, it was super, super, super strange, because it was still about the same thing, about love, and I didn't think about it before. And I wanted to remember it, but not like something from the past, but something active. So I started with storytelling in front of children in primary school, on 10, 11, on project on diversity and inclusion. And I grew with work and also give trainings in big companies for more inclusive workspace, which is really super hard for grown-ups, way harder than for children. And I also do the storytelling in theater. And to be honest, I really miss making the connection with people, because it's really nice to stand in theater and to tell my story, but it feels also a bit awkward that there's not an interaction. So I thought, why not share my favorite stories and walk my favorite pink route in the heart of the city of Amsterdam and connect history to storytelling, mostly to sharing stories with all these queers and allies who visit Amsterdam each day. So I started my LGBT tour, and something that makes me really happy, and I see that when I talk about it now.
Yeah, and the reason I really connect to your tour is because it brings forward oral history, right? Like, it's not about historical facts, but an experiential or an embodied kind of history. How would you say, though, that storytelling is, for you, part of a queer narrative, if that is at all a question?
Well, there's something quite interesting about personal storytelling, because it has in it the effect of personal storytelling. If you want it or don't want it, the effect is always that the people that are listening also want to tell their story. So I would never ask someone to really tell their story. It's just the effect. So then, as a listener, as part of the group, you can choose to go with that effect and share your own story as well, or not to tell it, which is, I think, way harder after 3 personal stories. And about queerness, I think, no, I don't think. I try on every LGBT tour to create this, first of all, a safe space for everyone to be able to tell their story. And I hope to do so by, first of all, telling very vulnerable and open stories about myself. And still after it is now 2 or 3 years, I don't know, I feel uncomfortable. For me, it's very important to still feel uncomfortable. If I wouldn't, then there's a problem. And I have to make new personal stories.
Yeah, I mean, it's beautiful in relation also to what Ezra was saying, in terms of when is the moment that you can choose to feel. I'm riffing off from what Ezra was saying. I haven't heard them say it, but in terms of, you know, when can we choose to feel uncomfortable, versus when we cannot even reach being uncomfortable because our film festival is prohibited or our tour is prohibited. How are you finding a platform? So how do people book your tour?
So I think to answer the first part, also at the beginning of my tour, I always share it would be very easy for me to tell something about the Second World War, and also gays and lesbians, so to say, because they were mostly labeled as gay men, were not safe in Amsterdam, so to say, and now they're free and open, and that's also very much the character of Amsterdam. And I tell them that it would be very easy for me to tell that story, but it's not. And I wanted to remind myself that with this group at that moment, it's always a place to be aware to that equality or striving for equality or a safe space for the community is something active, and there's not a settled finish point. So for me, that's very, very important. And I, of course, use the privilege that I have in Amsterdam to talk about it openly, to be aware that it's not, and that it's not for everyone, so that it's not.
Yeah.
And then I forgot your second question.
My second question.
Oh, your question.
About
the platform.
Yeah, the platform, yeah.
Okay. So I use Airbnb as a platform to reach guests on my tour. And I see it's something questioned. And also I felt a bit uncomfortable at the beginning. Actually, for me, it's really obvious and a great platform, because via Airbnb experiences, so that's where people can meet locals to experience something together. That's the idea. And I think at this point it still works very well as what Airbnb at the start wanted to be from the core. And I use that platform because for me it's like most direct, I'm not gonna say straight, it's the most direct line to find these queers and allies who are already visiting actually Amsterdam and want to have a queer or gay or LGBTQI plus experience. And for me, it's the best if they can come to my tour, because I think that's the way we can experience together and share stories together, make it like a 1 and 1 is 3, right? It makes this extra thing. And I have the sense, I don't know, there's this like this transcendent or holiness around funding, but for me funding would be, because everything changed now with COVID actually, was something that slows down the process and slows down for me to reach just the queer tourists, the people who are interested to have a queer perspective on the city. And with Dutch funding, you already have to have a goal in it, and you already have to, I would find a group that is already have the same opinion or know the same stories with it. And I would be the one who write the conclusion. And with Airbnb, actually, it's super clear because they book the tour, they pay for it. At the end, I always ask, do you want to chip in for people in the queer community who cannot pay for it? And I use that money, for example, to an inside safer LGBT tour for queer refugees in the Netherlands who do not find themselves comfortable in public space. So I can still do these things. But they review my tour. So it's super clear if the people like it or they don't like it. And reviews say what I'm aiming for, because for me it's super important that I'm really there for the people on my tour, and every tour is super different. I'm always surprised by what I'm telling myself. So last year, Airbnb told me that I was the best reviewed experience in Amsterdam. That was not only like a number, very
yeah.
But how did you call it?
Stars.
Yeah, like a rating. It was more that people like in depth rated in all these different levels. And for me, that's not so important, but super, super, super important to know that the people on the tour, they like it the way it goes, and it goes the way you do together.
Yeah, I think it's really important that you sort of break this idea of art funding or social activism funding as a sort of wholly independent thing, where of course we know that there's many boundaries or there's many gatekeepers involved in that. But I do think there's a very important and also a very troubling relationship between tourism and queer commodification. If we look, for example, of a history of New Orleans, a city in the south of the US, you really see that at one point people do not come to that place because it's known as a queer place or as a queer city. And then somehow after the 50s, people get to know that, oh, maybe we can actually go and party in queer cities. And straight families come in and they enjoy the party, leave the city empty, but have had their party. And I think something similar could be said is happening in Amsterdam at times, which is an opinion. So maybe informed or not, I'll leave that up to you. But how are you dealing, because you are actually working in the tourism sector before COVID at least. How is it something that you navigate in your practice of storytelling?
So I think on my last tour, actually, I heard about it, that for example, this white gay men who travel around the world to go to all these different prides, they don't like my tour. So I think that's a good thing. So there were a few times that I felt very uncomfortable myself on my tour. Yeah, that's really weird actually. And they were all the same. It was with a white cis gay couple. Once in the first year they walked away halfway, and the other times they had a lot of problems with opening up, because I talk about queer politics, I talk about what do you think about corporate companies joining Pride. I always have a story about religion and coming out or coming in, then in a way, not how the media frames it. And very, very vulnerable stories, and if you don't like it, then you don't like it. So actually it doesn't work by itself. And yeah, go about this. I was thinking about how, for example, it would be awesome if during COVID, for example, the city council, the city of Amsterdam, would support. They had an alternative flight program. It would be awesome if they would support things that were already there, right? There's Henk. He's already a tour guide, I think, for 10 to 15 years. Doing this tour, actually, especially, I think it's like the white gay man, and that's okay, but it really fits them. There's some stories about, well, it's stereotypically what I say, but yeah, stereotypicals are not for nothing, so to say, but it just fits a certain group. And there's me, but there's a ton of other things already, and very cool things within the queer community. And I think it's sad that they didn't take the chance as Pride Amsterdam or as a city council to support, especially these social entrepreneurs that already have a hard time during COVID, but started new projects. And I think it also says a lot. A new project that in the end didn't support the queer community, but support something else. And I think it's, no, I don't think it's hard. But I now know that it's for, it's difficult what I want to say, because for me it's so logical that I do something that is positive for everyone. But now I saw projects that in the end seem to be like they're good for the queer community, but in the end they're good for ego or status or something else. And I'm also very curious if the people who make these projects are aware of it. It's just something that makes me really sad when the queer community is just much more used as like a means and not as the end goal.
Yeah, which really also taps into something I was seeing a lot, at least in the Amsterdam sort of performing community, was that people really felt burned out by Pride because they were so over-asked by companies, and you can really see
oh my God, yes,
a festival. And yeah, I'm seeing Shishani nod, which I think it would be a good moment. Sanne, thank you so much for, and not saying thank you as in like stop talking, but maybe to at least ask Shishani and Ezra to join the conversation.
please.
Yeah, I was nodding because I, at the moment, do I have this weird kind of echo in my voice for you?
No.
Okay, it's only me. Okay. So at the moment, what is really popular is the theme protest song, because, you know, the world finally woke up and we're protesting on a large scale. But actually for 10 years, I was so not hip, you know, wanting to change the world. It was completely not hip, you know, and one of these songs was Minority. And now it's just like, okay, the agenda, you know, it's a hotline bling, you know, everybody's calling, everybody wants the protest song, everybody wants to hear Minority. So it's so, in a way, funny, you know, you can, when you kind of see through it, because generally we're not really talking about it. Are you really having these, how can I put it, trainings and stuff at your work? Are you really diversifying? Are you really inclusive? Who's really on top making the decisions in your company? Are there queer people there? I don't know. But everybody's waving the flag and having queer deodorant and socks and whatever. And I'm asked to perform my gay song everywhere. So it's really, it's funny in a way. In the beginning, it's just like, okay, you'll do it because all of a sudden, you know, it's extra money. But then it's also like, okay, but I see what's happening now. And then the feeling around it becomes very different, because what we do is not from this perspective of being hip and kind of this, you know, commodity in that sense. It's you know, it's daily life, it's day-to-day work. It's not just in this gap of August that, you know, I'm burnt out and I make all the money for the rest of the year. And then the rest of the year, nobody wants to hear my story. So it's yeah, it's always double feelings. I'm happy when people kind of open up space and want to talk about important things, but it's also, in a way, a bit weird that everything is now rainbow. Every lollipop is rainbow. I'm just like, guys, can we
Ask something?
Yeah.
They asked you during Pride to make something you didn't feel totally comfortable with?
No, I'm just saying, like, you get asked a lot. And I can also imagine House of Vineyard is the voguing group, you know, and I could just see them like run, really, literally run. Okay, yeah, 5 more minutes and then we have to be at that place because, you know, we have to perform there and there and there. Oh no, we don't have time because every day it's, you know, they're so hip and they're hip all the time and they're amazing all the time. But it was just interesting for me to see, like, okay, when am I asked to perform, what kind of events, and friends that I know who are, you know, from the queer community, it's really like high season.
Yeah.
So
And when you hear that, Esra, like, how do you relate to that in terms of, like, in Istanbul, for example, Pride is not allowed at the moment, right? I mean, you're
I
still
was
doing
actually
it.
at the rainbow symbol, and now I think soon Turkish state is gonna announce that rainbow symbol is a terrorist symbol soon, because they actually criminalize it. The kids were drawing rainbows to support health workers throughout the COVID-19, and since it's an LGBTI symbol, they ended. So I was just smiling the hypocrisy of this world, and like what a rainbow can mean in different contexts. So.
Are there for you, like Shishani or Esra, things you won't do? Or for organizations who will ask you?
To do something? We
Yeah.
generally ask someone to do something here. Like we try to push them to do something in general, and we are trying to organize what we want to organize for years, and I'm sure we will be back in the streets again, but we're still fighting to get back our pride the way we know it. And I think there was a point that we were actually discussing in small circles in Istanbul after Gezi uprising, and a massive pride that even if the like pride is going to be commercialized in Turkey, but the next year luckily it was banned, so we are back in the protest again. So it's a lot of tear gas and fun.
well,
Sorry.
yeah, crazy. I would say what I wouldn't do is perform at events of well, when it just feels not how could I say it? I'm not finding the word, it might come. But if like a company, big oil companies or banks ask me to perform at their queer pride event, I wouldn't go, because I don't want to, you know, before, let's say, maybe in a period where I was so much more financially dependent on whatever came in, then you're basically forced to perform just to make your money and pay your rent. Which I think is the case also for many artists, you know, like it's a hard world out there. But now like at this point, that is my standard. Like I will perform at places where I feel that people, that there's a right idea behind the event, or that the company is, you know, that I'm not supporting something that I would not support on my daily, you know, in my daily choices, just for the money, or just to be a queer artist at a big oil company or whatever.
Can I ask you also, Shishani, I was thinking about you being often a face of the band, which sounds worse than I mean it, but I mean there is a necessity sometimes also in like speaking up. Or I saw a video of you with Mama Cash, which is an organization that supports women X micro organizations and all kinds of different initiatives, and there is, of course, there is this idea of what works best, or an efficiency of activism, where being a face of something can help, or being a known person or a known name. How do you personally deal with that?
Well, the thing is, I'm, for example, with this interview, I'm saying and I'm doing something that I've been doing most of my career, you know, talking about these issues. So it's not that all of a sudden, because I'm famous, because you see me in some TV show, and now they're like, okay, we need a face that kind of, you know, will bring more viewers. So it's in line with my work. So if it's not, like, it would be weird for me to be the face of something that I don't stand for in my daily life. What is interesting to me is that all of a sudden, talking about important things, people are finally starting to listen to different perspectives, to listening to artists. That is the difference that I feel. And in terms of like being the face of things, it's in most cases because it's initiatives that I start. So then automatically you're the face. But I've never experienced something yet on that scale that I was just used for the face of being a singer. Not yet. I don't, you know.
Yeah. And it makes me wonder, and this will be your last moment after my, well, I can like swallow my question and then you can have the last question. But I can also formulate a question and then you have your last before we go to dance. Because I've seen some people fidgeting and people have been listening so nicely, even painting while listening or trying on different faces like Akis did. And because I was wondering, Sana, in terms of storytelling, I think that traditional storytelling, in the sense that you do it sometimes in a theater, which with an initiative that's called Echt Gebeurd, which is in a theater staging setting for a broader kind of audience. There's an expectation of what a story does, right? Like often it uses stereotypes to convey a quick narrative, or at least this is my experience with storytelling. And this is something I think that you actually try to counter. And I was wondering if you could say something about how you do that, if you feel that it relates to you.
That's a really good question, because since now I'm part of the team of Echt Gebeurd, I also train new storytellers, and before I was just someone who told stories a few times. Now I have to train people, so I have to know what I do to be able to train people. And I have to say, I think we are all born with something. And for me, it's, I think, storytelling. So I don't know exactly, it's not like something on purpose what I do. Maybe the purpose is in that I do tell these stories when I feel inconvenient, because I know there's a like a huge power in it. So when it would feel easy, then it's not good. So that's the thing I can tell about it. For example, with Echt Gebeurd, we don't tell hero stories. It always has to go to a core that's painful and real and not clear. And my stories have 1,000 different layers, and they don't have an answer. They don't have one message. And I see that it works because people react to it in different ways, and they take different things from it. And I just want to tell a story. I don't want to tell a message. I think that would be the answer.
Thank you. Shall we wrap it up?
Yeah, just one quick thing to answer to what you just said, Sana, to answer your question, Simon. It's what is interesting to me is that in different contexts, when I talk, for example, about queer issues, people don't expect that story from me for whatever reason, because the way I look, and that is really interesting to play with, because they're like, oh, you're gay? Oh, really? You know, it's like, because they have this idea of what a gay person would look like, how a gay person acts, what you do, what you don't do, you know, like your express, all these kind of things. So telling stories, or just being there and being you, telling that story of, you know, I fell in love with a woman and I never thought that I didn't consider myself as gay, or me just talking about things and then people texting me afterwards like, I'm still shocked that you're gay. You know, this then is more in Namibia context, but I think that's the beauty of being able to tell a story, so that somebody out there has heard you and seen you and can be confronted with maybe a different reality than they had in mind. So for me, that's, you know, the importance of what we're doing is just that visibility, because by being visible, like, and this is something that I always tell when I talk about the story of the song Minority, it's like, after I sang that song, I got flooded with inboxes from young girls in Namibia who did their coming out to me because they didn't know any other gay woman. There was nobody that they knew of. So then they just, you know, talked to me about their problems and all these kind of things. And that only has to do with the fact that I told a story. I told my story at that moment in time, and they saw me there. So it's just like another plight why we should be telling stories, and why we should just, you know, why it's so important to have that space, whatever space it is.
you break the expectation, because these
Exactly.
girls recognize something in you at first, and then in the second, much more important part, you break the expectation and you make them free, actually.
Exactly.
So,
Just show yourself, and they're like, oh, if she's gay, well then why could I be not be gay? You know? So
yeah, or different. That's great.
or different, yeah.
So showing ourselves.
Absolutely.
Putting up my little jacket. Let's party and let's celebrate the launch. And for more stories, also please go through the window project 2020 on Instagram, because all of the 20 works are there and they're all really amazing, I shall say objectively. And Shishani Franks, I want to thank you, and as well Aspan and Sanne Pols. Thank you so much for this conversation, and thank you so much, all of you who have stayed to listen from any home or shelter space you are at. And Mira, good night. Mini, thank you for your fundraise link, and thank you all so much. Take it off, DJ.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Enjoy the party.
Ciao, guys.